Growing Grace podcast. So today I was fully ready to talk to you guys about something else. I had a different subject in mind and prepared, but I was going through my Bible and kind of cleaning out some of the notes and just reorganizing a little bit. And I came across a little mini sermon that I had to give in one of my classes at church last year. And it spoke to me because it reminded me a lot, and it speaks volumes to just some of the stuff that some of my friends are currently going through. And once I found it, I knew that I had found it right before recording this for a reason, and that God wants me to speak on this. So last year I was in a class at my church where we had to just make up like a little sermon and share it, and whatever God put on our heart to share. Our pastor just wanted us to write a little sermon to share with the class. And so when I entered the class, I knew this was something I was going to eventually have to do, and I really had no idea what I was supposed to speak about. So I started praying about it, and I said, God, please just show me, give me a word, whatever it may be, just help me know what I'm supposed to talk about. And I wasn't really getting anything, and not that long before I was supposed to speak in class, God showed me exactly what I was supposed to talk about. He was faithful. It was just in his timing and not my own, which I feel like is a pretty common theme in most of our lives. But I have it right here, and I just wanted to share it with you guys because, like I said, it was a word that I know for a fact the Holy Spirit spoke through me, because when I was rereading this, I didn't even remember writing half of it. I remember the story that I talk about in here. I remember that happening, but other than that, the connections and everything were just 100% God. So I just wanted to share that with you guys today. So, like I said, a couple weeks, maybe a week before I was supposed to share a little sermon in class, I was on my way to the evangelism group that I'm a part of at my church. And I was driving there at about 6 p.m. It was a little bit before 6. I had to be to the church at 6. And I see a dog dart across the road. And I get sad because I'm an animal lover. I love dogs. I love animals so much. So I saw a dog dart across the road. And I was like, oh, that's so sad. And then I was like, well, I'm sure the owner is going to be right behind that dog trying to get it back. Or maybe it's running back to its house from, chasing a bunny or something across the street. So I didn't really think much about it. Well, 3 hours later, when I was done with my evangelism group and on my way home, I saw the same dog running in about the same area, back and forth across the street and the sidewalk and in a parking lot. And that just made me super sad. Once again, as an animal lover, I knew that was someone's pet. Someone was missing their dog, that this dog was scared out of its mind. So I found a safe spot to park my car, and I got out, and I looked at the dog, and I said, come here, and I just started making noises, clicking noises, and whistling for the dog to come by me. And it looked at me and ran away. And so I got back in my car, and I tried following it, and I once again stopped in a different spot closer to the dog and parked my car. And at this point, I was in tears, and I was shaking, and I was so sad, and I was so scared for the dog. And this was a really busy road, and I did not want it to get hit, and I especially did not want to see it get hit. So I pleaded with it, and I looked at the dog, and I said, come here, buddy, please. I'm just trying to help you, as I'm bawling my eyes out. And once again, the dog looked at me and darted away. And I tried following it again this time, but I completely lost it. It was extremely dark outside. I was putting myself and other people at risk because I couldn't just drive around and slam on my brakes if I saw it. So I gave up, and I tried going home, and then I was like, maybe I can come back out and try to find this dog. But it was gone. It was in between houses and in people's backyards, and I just had no chance of seeing it. And it hit me after some of the emotion went away that the way I felt towards that dog is exactly how God feels towards his sons and daughters that run from him. So one of the most common verses in the Bible for non-Christians and Christians alike, I feel like one of the most well-known, is Jeremiah 29:11, where it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a hope and a future." And although this is a very common verse that many people know and have signs of, it's a verse that many Christians say that they believe, but they don't live like they believe it, myself included sometimes. We like to think that our way is better, and that if we don't take a situation into our own hands, it's just never going to get fixed. It's never going to get solved. Things are going to go terribly wrong because we have been waiting for God to move in the situation and he just hasn't yet. Or he has, just not in the way we've expected it, so we've missed how he's moved. But another verse that shows us the dangers of thinking this way is in Proverbs. It is Proverbs 14, verse 12. And it says, "There is a path before each person that seems right, but it ends in death." And then in Proverbs 16 and 25, it says, once again, "There is a path before each person that seems right, but it ends in death." Both of those verses just show us the danger of when we think our way is better or our way is right and God's isn't right. Because, like it says, there is a way that seems right to man, but ultimately it leads to death. We are the dog that is running away from someone that's just trying to help and just trying to save us. We act like God is trying to hurt us, just like that dog was trying to act like I was going to hurt it. Another verse in the Bible is Isaiah 53:6, where it says, "All of us like sheep have strayed away. We've left God's path to follow our own. Yet the Lord laid on him the sins of us all." The dog was trying to follow the logic of the fool talked about in Proverbs 12:15, where it says, "Fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others." Unfortunately for the dog, there was a barrier, where for us it's the veil, separating it from understanding that I only wanted to help, just like the veil separates us from understanding that God just wants to help. So sometimes as Christians, whether we like to believe it or not, we place barriers in our own way, separating us from God and what he wants for us because things aren't happening in our timing, or we don't trust him enough to take care of us. When we put up these barriers, we think we're blocking out the evil, but in reality, we're blocking it in. We're trying to drag that veil back down, but it's like putting up cement walls with all the evil. It's trapping it inside instead of accepting God's grace and letting it all go and blocking it out. We're blocking God's goodness and trapping ourselves on the same side as evil. So I strongly advise, don't be like the dog in my story and run from God because you don't understand what he's doing. You just use it as motivation to draw closer to him, and he will wrap his loving and protecting arms around you. And that is the word that I gave in my class at church, but I just wanted to expand on it a little bit because I think it really does speak volumes, not only to what my friends are currently going through, but also what I'm going through. When I went to therapy, my therapist and I just had this saying where it's don't just go through it, grow through it. And that's kind of where Growing Grace comes from, is because God is growing me in his grace. I'm growing in God's grace, and I'm growing through everything that is happening in my life. But I really love the saying, don't just go through it, grow through it. It can be extremely difficult to trust God's timing. That's still something that I don't understand, and I honestly don't think I ever will until I get to heaven. But God is always waiting there with open arms. We're the ones running from him and making it harder on ourselves. There's another common saying that I see all the time when it says something along the lines of, when you look for God's hands in everything, you'll start to see his hands in everything. And I think that's just really beautiful because we always say like, oh, God has a plan, just trust it, and then proceed to try to figure it all out by ourselves or on our own. But when we start looking for the small ways that God is working and focus on that instead of the negative situation that seems so big to us, is when we start to truly see how he's working in our lives. And although it may be at a slower pace than all of us would like, that doesn't mean he's not working. Last year at Passion, there was a speaker, and she talked about not putting God in a box or not expecting him to work in the same way he's worked in the past. So, for example, if God worked in one way in your life, don't always expect him to work in that way. God likes to work in different ways because he is a miraculous God and he can work in so many different ways in our life. Don't put him in a human box. This is something I recently spoke to one of my friends about, is that as humans, when we get hurt, we like to apply that hurt onto God. We like to apply that hurt onto him and just give him human characteristics. But God is God. He is his own being. He's not human. God will never fail us like people will. God doesn't hurt us. The church doesn't hurt us. Brandon Lake loves to say at a lot of his concerts when he opens up a time for people to accept Jesus is that he asks the question if you've ever had food poisoning. And when people think about it, regardless of whatever their answer is, he says, well, it's the same as church. Just because you have food poisoning doesn't mean you never eat again. And just because you've gotten hurt by a person doesn't mean you stop going to church. Doesn't mean you stop loving Jesus, because Jesus still loves you. Jesus didn't hurt you, the people did. And in this, that dog very well could have been abused by its owners. Maybe its owners didn't love it, but I was just trying to help it. And because it had the bad principle of being scared, it ran away from someone that was just trying to help it. And sadly, I have no idea where this dog is now. I don't know if it got reunited with its family. I don't know what happened to it. But I can so gratefully say that even though I could make the parallels between me trying to help this dog and God trying to rescue us, God knows exactly where each and every one of us end up. He knows exactly where we are. And even though I had to give up helping that dog, God will never give up helping you, because he is there with you every step of the way. I'm a person that loves illustrations and stories, and there's a pretty popular story out there about footprints on the beach. And it's a story of how when you're going through a really rough season of life and you look down and you only see one set of footprints, you say, God, what the heck, where are you? You promised to be with me through all of this. Think about it in the perspective of those aren't your footprints. Those are Jesus's footprints, because he's carrying you through this rough time because you can't carry yourself. And that is a story that I just absolutely love, because I feel like a lot of times as humans, once again, we just apply our anger and our feelings and we apply that to God. Because as humans, we get abandoned. People abandon us. People leave us on our own to struggle. But that's not God. And he loves you too much to do that. Even when you push him away, he's still there. If you look for his presence, it's still going to be there, regardless of whether you want it or not. Because he will never leave you or forsake you. You are his child. You are the daughter or the son of a king. And he loves you so much, and he loves you way too much to ever leave you. I know it doesn't make it easier when you're going through an extremely difficult time in life. It doesn't make it easy knowing that sometimes you just can't feel the presence of God. But even when you can't feel it, he's still there. It's like the song, Waymaker, Miracle Worker, Promise Keeper, Light in the Darkness. My God, that is who you are. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. And it's true. Like I said, when you look for God's goodness and when you look for God's hands in things, you'll start to see them in everything. And that's the beauty of it, is that God is always there. He's always there for you to turn to. We had an encounter night this past Sunday at my church, and the pastor brought up a phenomenal point of a lot of us like to look for peace in the world or in worldly things. But you will never have true peace in the world unless everything in the world is peaceful, which is never. Whereas when you look for peace in God, he can give it to you right away, because his peace is supernatural. It's not of this world, and not everything has to be in place for you to get his peace. And so I just want to encourage you all today that if you are that lost dog running away from God, just know that he's not trying to hurt you. He's trying to help you. He would never do anything to hurt you. He's right there with you every single step of the way. And like I've said in past episodes, he uses your deepest pain to launch your greatest calling. He just loves you too much to ever let you go. And when you push him away, it pains him. When you cry, he cries every tear there with you. And I would just encourage each and every one of you that if you are that dog that's running away, stop running. You're just going to get tired. Like I said, I have no idea what happened to that dog. I would love to think that it was reunited with its family, with its owners, if they were good owners. But your story doesn't have to be like that dog. It doesn't have to be unknown ending. You can know that your Father in heaven will rescue you if you just stop running and let him take you into his loving arms. So I'll leave you guys with that today to just think about, or if you know of anyone that is that lost dog, I would just encourage you to not push them too much. I would encourage you to not force it upon them, but just let them know that you're there. Don't try to force anything on them. Just encourage them to grow closer to God and to just pray over them, pray for them. But like I said, if you are that lost dog, just stop running, because God will meet you exactly where you are. I know that God is going to use this to speak to some of you out there, and I just hope that you all can get something from this, because I know it certainly resonated with me, so I know it'll resonate with someone else too. I know I'm not the only one. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of the Growing Grace podcast, and I will see you next week.